Welcome into the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Brandon Kravitz here along with Nick Whalen, and we have got a load to get to because we are refreshed, we are rejuvenated, we are back from the NBA All-Star break. We are going to try and keep our All-Star takes to a minimum because chances are, if you are the hoop head that we are, you have already been beaten to death with that topic, but we'll talk about the players that are going to help you win a championship down the stretch of the fantasy season, and recording this a little bit later than we normally do. So if you have questions live, we will answer those to wrap today's episode in the bounce. Nick, it's good to reconnect with you. I feel like my batteries are completely recharged. Do you feel the same way coming off of the All-Star break?
I think I could say that. Yeah. I wasn't really looking to recharge him. These last 2 days without basketball have been brutal. I found myself watching a lot of college basketball, which is good, because I always have to make a choice every night. And it's like I usually lean toward, Hornets Wizards as opposed to like whatever the big college basketball game is. So it's been nice to, kind of catch back up on that and watch college basketball outside of just studying it for the draft. But like you said, we're in a different time slot, obviously a vastly different time slot, like 12 hours later and a day later than we normally are. But we still want to give everybody 4 episodes per week because of our Sirius XM show switching to the morning, our show on VSiN, bunch of scheduling changes post All-Star break. It's going to be nebulous week to week. So keep an eye out on the YouTube schedule. We'll keep giving you those 4 episodes, but Brandon and I, it might be Tuesday some weeks, might be Wednesday, might be Thursday. You never know, but we'll still be coming to you throughout the regular season. I guess we could talk All-Star. You said we don't want to keep beating it to death. We're going to keep beating it because, we're recording this like 8 minutes before Hornets Lakers has even started. So, we could do a live podcast, I guess, on a game as it transpires, but it's been all quiet.
I mean, if that doesn't get the listening audience, and if a live update on Hornets Lakers standalone on a Wednesday night doesn't get listenership up, I'm running out of ideas.
We'll just do play-by-play. Yeah. And Williams passes it to Ball. And you can listen to it tomorrow and feel like you were there. Also, by the way, if you're watching this on video, I feel like I need to address this because I keep seeing my hands in the screen. I was hanging out with one of my friends earlier in the evening.
Wow. Okay.
They have 2 daughters, one who is 4, one who is 2. I got my nails painted for the first time ever. It's not coming off. I don't know when it's going to come off. So if you see that on the screen, that is why. Anyway, All-Star Weekend. I'll keep this brief. We talked about it.
You're a TV superstar now. You gonna flash that on VSiN?
I don't know. If this isn't off by tomorrow afternoon, I might just have to sit on my hands the whole show. But we will find out. Very disappointed by All-Star Weekend. I think our expectations were low going in anyway. Still somehow disappointed by the All-Star game itself. Dunk contest I think was fine. 3-point contest essentially was like it always is. Solid. Skills competition, probably something they should have gotten rid of 4 or 5 years ago. But I think it said a lot, Brandon, that like an hour after the All-Star game ended, we already had reports coming out that the NBA is thinking about changes for next year's All-Star game. This format did not provide the boost that the NBA thought it would. I think there were a number of mistakes throughout this. I thought the target score was too low. The level of defense. I think the way Alex and I agreed on it on Monday was there was just enough defense to prevent the cool plays, but not enough to make it feel competitive.
That's probably a fair way to put it. I mean, I saw Victor Wembanyama was playing this game like it was a game 7. Yeah. So I liked what I saw as far as his effort and tenacity in this game. Jaren Jackson Jr. had a blocked shot at one point in the game, and I felt like the fact that you had a target score kept these guys from just jacking up threes, which had become the biggest issue outside of the obvious lack of defense over the last few years of the All-Star game. It just became a live 3-point shooting competition. And so you saw more plays around the basket. I didn't hate it nearly as much as everybody else. In fact, I didn't hate it at all. I wanted them to go to this format years ago because I love the Rising Stars Challenge. I think it's the best thing going on All-Star Weekend, and they changed the format to exactly that. So I kind of got my wish. Was it non-competitive? Yeah, to a degree, but it's the All-Star game. You're never going to get them going. This is never going to be 4 nations in hockey. You're just not going to get guys that bleed for this. So I would get over that or just stop watching it for anybody out there. As far as the other stuff, I'm with you. The skills challenge has been terrible forever. I don't know why it's not entertaining at all. And the fact that the Spurs tried to bastardize it is the funniest thing I've ever seen. And the dunk contest, we all know. I'm not going to say anything that hasn't been said a million times that needs more stars. I love me some Mac McClung. Got my Magic sweater on right now, but he can only take you so far. And the 3-point shooting competition is what it is. We like that, and then the stars show up for it. It is BS, by the way. And I swear we're going to move on past this because there's no reason we need to talk about this any further. The fact that Steph Curry didn't participate in the 3-point shooting competition in San Francisco, no sense to me whatsoever at all.
Well, I get the sense that there was originally going to be, I think, months ago, there was talk of doing a, redux of last year's, WNBA versus Steph Curry 3-point shootout. And I think they wanted Caitlin Clark to do it. And then like a month ago, Caitlin Clark says, okay, I don't really want to do it. I'm going to save it for next year. So my guess is that Steph was probably going to be involved in that. And then once that fell through, I guess they could have shoehorned him into the 3-point contest. It is a little weird that he didn't do it at home. I actually hadn't even thought about that. But I think there was something grander to be planned, and then just didn't end up happening this year, whether it was going to be Ionescu or Caitlin Clark. But yeah, I'm still on team just accept it for what it is. I think if you go in just saying, this is gonna be fun, it's gonna be laid back, it's not. I don't know why. Like the NBA is the one that's pushing this like ultra competitive narrative. Like it's not like the players are saying like, man, I wish the All-Star game was more competitive. It's like it's coming from the league office for some reason, and I don't think anything we saw on Sunday really changed that. I guess in one of the 3 games, it felt like we saw a little bit of defense once like one team hit 30 on their way to 40 on the target score.
Yeah, but at least there was a little bit of suspense. There was suspense at least with these scores. It looked like the Rising Stars team was about to knock off the OGs, and then you kind of in that position, you're Steph and KD and whoever the hell else was on that team, and you kind of have to step up because you don't want to get embarrassed. And that's the kind of thing that I think when you start to get the guys that actually want to compete to any level that are the true top stars, because the league goes as the top guys go. Yeah. Let's be honest. I love LeBron James, but the All-Star game has started to suck pretty much ever since he took over the mantle. Once he grabbed the torch, the All-Star game, you follow the timeline here. Once he took over, the All-Star game started to decline because he's friends with everybody. And in a buddy-buddy league, nobody wants to embarrass anybody else. And so everybody's kumbaya. We need these guys to start hating each other again. Then when they meet in the All-Star game, there's going to be some built-in animosity and competitiveness. This wasn't an issue when MJ was the top guy. It wasn't an issue when Kobe was the top guy. LeBron has been a great ambassador for the league. I'm not trying to dog him, but in this particular instance, LeBron's star power has hurt the All-Star game.
Totally disagree. I think this is there's like a nostalgia factor going on here where we think back, like Kobe was still in that conversation, if not the guy, until 2011, 2012. He wasn't the player that he was 5 years earlier, but he was still that figure. He was still playing in the All-Star game every year. Go back and watch those All-Star games. Those were not super competitive. The big difference is the amount of 3-pointers. A team took 97 threes in the All-Star game last year. And we still saw Steph pulling up from half court. We still saw Lillard and Mitchell and everybody else launching threes this past Sunday. Like my suggestion is put a limit on the number of threes that could be taken. It's going to force a more competitive game, or at least like a better aesthetic game. Like we see enough threes in the NBA regular season. Most teams are taking 35 threes a game anyway. Like we don't need to see double that or triple that in the NBA All-Star game. I think we just want something that looks something like basketball. And to your point on the Rising Stars, by the way, like I'm not necessarily against or not necessarily with Draymond here, I should say, as far as, these guys don't deserve to be here. Like I kind of like that motivating factor, get those guys on that stage. I think the big problem is we've just had 2 like back-to-back pretty bad drafts, outside of Wembanyama, and there's just not a lot of young star power. So it felt like there were a bunch of G League guys out there because nobody knows who Jalen Wells and Ryan Dunn are, and they're in the closing 5, And, Brandon Miller's injured. Scoot was injured. Wembanyama was playing in the actual All-Star game, so he wasn't eligible to be on the Rising Stars team. But I think that actually has some legs long-term because, you think about Cooper Flagg playing on that stage next year, all of a sudden that thought is pretty appealing. Or, you look back at some of the bigger draft classes throughout the years, like what if they had done that in 2003 or 2004 And all of a sudden you got, LeBron James, Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, trying to take on Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe and those guys. Like, that would have been intriguing. I just think it was kind of a uniquely bad year to institute this.
Well, yeah. And so then we should I think more people should take that sort of mentality before they rip the current format, because this does have some potential in the right years. And maybe this year just wasn't that. And it doesn't help, as I continue to pile on LeBron James, that he bowed out the day of. Or
that wasn't a great look.
It was not. It was not. But I said, let's talk about it for a minute. We went on for 10 because we're opinionated people. And here we are. Let's talk about the latest news around the association. Victor Wembanyama, the aforementioned, is doubtful with an illness for the Thursday night game against the Phoenix Suns. Durability has not been the issue that we thought it was going to be when he came into the league. He's played 46 of 52 games, and this isn't even any sort of ligament or pull or anything like that. This is a simple illness that can happen to anybody, no matter how big or small you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually kind of a good thing that this is like the top news item. We didn't have anything weird happen over All-Star break. We didn't have any, surprising injuries. By all accounts, Mark Williams is going to be out there for the Lakers Hornets game, which is about to tip off. And, that was kind of the big question mark, going into the All-Star break is, okay, is there going to be anything that comes out of this medical red flag that the Lakers staff apparently found? And it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. So yeah, disappointing, obviously for the Spurs, who are still in the play-in hunt, very much so, trying to chase down Sacramento and Phoenix and some of those other teams in the middle bottom of the West. But it's a big game. I mean, it's also the front end of a back-to-back too. So maybe they're just being cautious here. It's a home back-to-back coming out of the break for San Antonio. So doesn't look like Wembanyama is going to play on Thursday, but hopefully he can be back out there against Detroit on Friday.
So we have Jrue Holiday set to make his return to the Celtics lineup. He's been out since early February. He's averaged 11 points, 4.4 rebounds, and 3.7 assists so far on the season. His percentages are down. This just hasn't really been a great year for Jrue Holiday, the fantasy asset.
Not really, no. And, obviously we started to see the numbers decline pretty starkly last season. And that's to be expected. You go from really the clear number 3, if not number 2 on some nights in Milwaukee, to all of a sudden just joining this elite roster in Boston. Like we knew he would turn into more of a role player. And he was 33 last year, obviously 34 now, but it's been rough, man. The 3-point shooting has been very much up and down. The fact that he's at 34% now feels like a miracle, because there were some really rough stretches early in the year. Free throw shooting has actually been really good, but he's not taking enough where that really matters. The field goal percentage is down significantly. That's really, I think what's killing you fantasy wise, because the counting stats, yeah, they're down compared to last year, but he's also playing almost 3 fewer minutes per game. So he's not, he's still giving you 11, 4.5, 4 assists, 1 steal. But, this is a guy that over the last few years was 48, 50, 47, 49% from the field, just shooting 44% this year. I mean, he's kind of just been a replacement level guy. And, I think the name value at this point is certainly exceeding the production. With that said, I'm still not worried about this Boston team. I know Cleveland's look better. I know there's obviously a lot of positive sentiment around the Knicks. I don't think we can rule out the Bucks, but I think deep down, all those teams still fear Boston the most. I think Boston doesn't have that same level of motivation now compared to this time last year when they hadn't won anything.
Absolutely. They are still the top dog. They're still minus the odds to make it out of the East. So that and rightfully so. But I think if anybody is going to really knock the doors down, I originally thought coming into the season, I was really bought in on this Knicks team. They haven't done anything to address their depth, which at some point is going to become an issue for them. And they're impressive, but they're not as impressive as Cleveland has been. And Cleveland already had that year last year where they looked like they were scared of the moment. They've kind of gone through these stages where 2 years ago you had Jared Allen actually say that. I didn't realize the lights would be this bright. And then last year they took a step forward. And it looks like they're kind of past that now. Kenny Atkinson has done an incredible job with that team. Let's talk about Donovan Clingan for a moment, the big man for the Portland Trailblazers. He's been in an interesting spot here, and he has an opportunity to really mop up some minutes. Robert Williams missed the last 2.5 games. DeAndre Ayton is set to miss a couple of games here. Is this a guy that you're excited about as we get back into action here?
Yeah, I mean, one of the themes of tonight's episode is, guys who will shape the stretch run, guys who could really emerge and win you leagues. And we're not necessarily looking to scrape the bottom of the barrel and say, oh, well, this team's going to be tanking and, Keyshawn George is going to save your season. But I think Clingan is in a really, really good spot here. And, Portland, because of their surge over the last month, like all of a sudden they went from very clear lottery team, maybe in the bottom four to it's going to be difficult for them to get into the bottom four. They're closer to making the play-in than they are entering the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. And, we've seen teams jump up in the lottery. Obviously the Atlanta Hawks did it last year, so I'm not saying they're out of it, but Portland, I think it would almost be better for Donovan Clingan if they had not gone on this run, because I think they would be more motivated to just not bring DeAndre Ayton back at this point. Now, Ayton's going to be out till probably mid-March at the earliest. So maybe this just ends up solving itself. And if this injury, it's a calf, if that ends up lingering into late March and there's 9 games left in the season, why bring him back? I think what I'm saying is I think there's a world in which Clingan is the starting center the rest of the way for the Portland Trailblazers. And, on a per minute basis, he's been fantastic. That we have not seen too many games where the minutes have, extended past 17 or 18. But if you look at the 7 games, Brandon, in which he's played more than 21 minutes this season, we're talking 9 points on over 60% from the field, 13.5 rebounds, 3.1 blocks.
Yeah, and we knew that he had this sort of ability coming out of UConn, and somebody that was really impressive from what we saw from him in the tournament a year ago. And I think it's a big part of what got him drafted where he did. And now he's had a chance to kind of get his sea legs under him. It's always tough to make that transition going from the college game to the pro game. And he wasn't thrown right to the fire. We thought that when he was acquired in the draft that they were immediately going to move off of one of these other bigs. That hasn't happened. And so now it seems like this was the proper ramp-up period, and whether it was on accident or on purpose, they've got Donovan Clingan now ready to go for this stretch run for them. And like you said, I don't really know exactly what that looks like for Portland, because they're too bad to be good and they're too good to be bad. So they're kind of sitting right there in the middle, but it does seem like they're building something here. I have about 5 names that I want to get to. I don't know if there's any that you want to throw into the mix as well. We're talking about potential league winners down the stretch. Maybe that's a term that's overused in the fantasy circles, but guys that you're really going to rely on in these final couple weeks of the regular season. So we're going to get to all of that. But first, my guy Nick is going to tell you a little bit about our partners in Edge Boost.
Oh, yeah. We got 2 great sponsors coming at us this week. First is Edge Boost. Have you ever had your debit card declined or had to call your bank at 3 a.m. in Vegas? That's a scary situation. Hopefully that's never happened to you. But Edge Boost is the first consumer-facing online bank dedicated to the gaming industry. There are numerous benefits to using Edge Boost. We're talking $250K per day in debit deposits, unlimited withdrawals, cashback on sports betting, DFS, sweeps, 100% approval for all gaming activity, financial segmentation for discretion and responsible gaming. It's compatible for predictions markets, iCasino, DFS, sports betting, lottery, brick and mortar, horse racing, sweeps, no transaction reviews or account freezes. You can go to edgeboost.bet right now. That's edgeboost.bet. Use our promo code ROTOPOD, ROTOPOD, at edgeboost.bet. We're also brought to you by Pool Genius. You want to win more in your golf, March Madness, football pools. Pool Genius gives you data-driven picks and strategies to outsmart the competition. With over a decade of analytics and historical data, Pool Genius is the only site dedicated exclusively to helping people win sports pools. With Pool Genius, users win 3 times more often than expected. And RotoWire listeners get exclusive offers over at Pool Genius. Go to poolgenius.com/RotoWire for up to 55% off, or you can start a 4-day free trial. That's poolgenius.com/RotoWire. My brother, I think you're muted.
Nick, this is the second week. You would think. Now, past the All-Star break, I said I was refreshed and rejuvenated, but not rejuvenated enough to click my mute button properly.
Just a little rusty coming out of the break,
Perhaps, rest versus rust, a constant debate in the NBA circles. But let's talk about a guy, one of these surge candidates, guys that we think are going to be important pieces to your stretch run in fantasy basketball. Max Christie, to me, is one of them. He has seen a huge jump in production with the Dallas Mavericks. He averaged 8 points, 3 rebounds, an assist and a half during his time with the LA Lakers in 6 games with Dallas. I don't know if this is sustainable or not, but there's one part of me that says no way and another part that says no. This is just the role that he's in now. 17 points per game, 5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, and 1.2 steals per game during his time with the Dallas Mavericks. This feels like a guy, you put him right in to your starting lineup and you feel pretty good about what he's been able to produce lately.
Yeah, this has been pretty incredible. And we started to see this from Christie before the trade too. Started playing more minutes. Guys were missing time for the Lakers, and he entered the starting lineup really back in mid-December. But it wasn't until later in December, early January, where we started to see some of that potential. And I think what would concern me a little bit here is Dallas has had guys missing time. Kyrie, Klay Thompson, I think missed their last game before the break. PJ Washington's been out. Obviously, Davis and Gafford. I mean, those are not one-to-one positional fits, but they're still missing, that's, I don't know what that combines for, like 80 minutes a night out of your rotation. But the big one is Caleb Martin, who of course they acquired at the deadline. And we got a report in early February that he was still at least 2 to 3 weeks, away from playing. So haven't really received an update since then. They haven't given us anything during the break. Dallas doesn't play till Friday. The more time Caleb Martin misses, the better that is for Max Christie. But I think Christie has played so well, even over this small sample, that we're probably looking at a reduction in minutes when Martin is back, but he could still be somebody who's essentially the sixth man, in terms of minutes. Like, I think we're still probably looking at 25 to 28 minutes until this recent run wears off. So I'm in on him.
And if I'm Nico Harrison, the GM of the Dallas Mavericks, and he's one of the guys that came over in the Luka trade, I'm saying to Jason Kidd, play this man. He's making me look good. He's the only thing making me look good right now. Seriously. Is the production from Max Christie and Anthony Davis for the 2.5 quarters that he was able to give the team. Jaxson Hayes is somebody, if we're talking about that deal, I think one of the guys that went from the doghouse to the penthouse in terms of his role with the LA Lakers. Now he's a lob threat from LeBron and Luka. I mean, as opposed to being a backup to Anthony Davis. This is a huge change in roles. He's averaged over 8 points per game, about 6 rebounds, 2 assists, almost 2 blocked shots, and 1.3 steals. But for a guy that you were getting off the wire, is this somebody you're looking at and saying, I think he's going to play a role, or is he still not there? Obviously a big jump from where he was, but is this somebody that you think could be a key contributor to a winning roster?
I think he's somebody that should be rostered. I still think we need to be realistic about what kind of stat potential we're talking about here. Like, he's going to be super efficient. He might shoot like 80% from the field the rest of the way, like for real. I mean, all he does is dunks and layups, and those are going to be there, in spades with Luka and LeBron feeding him the ball. But he's not necessarily like a high volume rebounder. He'll have those splash games every now and then, but you look at that win against Utah, 23 minutes, started the game off with 2 alley-oops. He only finished with 2 boards in that game. And obviously you're taking Anthony Davis out of the mix, but Luka's a very good rebounder for his position. Obviously a guy with size. LeBron's a great rebounder. Reeves is an underrated rebounder. It's going to come down to how consistently is he blocking shots. Can he give you close to 2 blocks per game? If so, I think if you're in a category league and blocks is a category that, it's pretty difficult to find off the waiver wire, especially at this point. I think the boost in field goal percentage, even on relatively low volume, the blocks, and then the rebounds that you hope you catch them on the right week. Maybe not an every week starter if you're in like a 14 or a 16 team league, but absolutely should be rostered. I mean, I thought by now the Lakers would make another addition at center. And, I know they brought in Alex Len, went horribly in his first game against the Jazz. He will be better, but I still think Jaxson Hayes, as the incumbent, is the guy with the inside track to those center minutes.
Yeah, and he has those 6-for-6 night potentials like he had about a week ago. That's the floor, is him being able to not necessarily shooting 100%, but close to it, like you said. And then the ceiling is what he gives you in terms of defense. Jimmy Butler is a guy that seems reinvigorated after the trade. And not everybody, by the way, that I have nominated here was involved in some sort of trade at the deadline. But these are the guys that I think you've seen a lot of You've seen a big value change up over the last couple of weeks. His averages across the board are up. He's averaging 4 more points per game in an offense where he's not the primary scorer. So that should also come with an increase in efficiency. And maybe he's somebody that can be the player that you invested in to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, if you're still holding Jimmy Butler, I think any change was going to be viewed as good change, right? I mean, it's not like Golden State is necessarily the ideal spot for him, but I think it's pretty close because it's a team that, yeah, you have name value in someone like Draymond alongside Curry, but Draymond doesn't really give you anything offensively. They badly needed another option. And I think you got to be encouraged by what you've seen from Butler so far. I mean, far more consistent than we saw at any point with Miami. You know, in terms of the non-scoring categories, I think that's what's been the most encouraging. Like the rebounding is up, the assists have been there. Had a 4-steal game, against Milwaukee shortly after that trade went down. He's been getting to the line at a crazy rate. I mean, 13, 15, 6, and 6 free throw attempts over his 4 games in a Warriors uniform. So I think he's trending up. The one big variable here, though, is Jonathan Kuminga, who is back at practice and should be back on the court, within the first 2 or 3 games after the All-Star break. And obviously Jimmy Butler is going to take priority over him, but how those two play together, it's kind of another, shaky-ish shooter that you're throwing into that rotation. I think that'll be interesting to watch, but I'm more worried about that from a Kuminga standpoint than I am Butler.
Yeah, they've been looking for somebody to take over and somebody to lighten the load for Steph Curry, and Jimmy Butler is certainly going to get you there quicker than Kuminga could. If Kuminga was that guy, they wouldn't have felt like they needed to make this move. Ausar Thompson is somebody that I've got on the list. He got off to that slow start because of the blood clot issue at the start of the year, but in the last month, we're talking about 12 points per game, 5.5 boards. He's up to 2 steals a game, and that's over his last 13. Including tying a season high for 19 points in his most recent outing. So we've already fallen in love with Amen Thompson, and now perhaps it's time that his twin brother catches up with him at the most important part of the year.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to catch up to what Amen is doing, defensively especially, but the steals have been there for the most part with the SAR. Over 2 steals per game over his last 12. He's not playing that many minutes. I think the minutes are ultimately going to dictate what kind of upside we're talking here because I think you compare his numbers to Amen and you're like, all right, these guys are twins. Why are they not doing the exact same thing? Well, Ausar's playing 24 minutes per game. And I don't really get why that number hasn't ticked up a bit. Obviously, they value the shooting that guys like Hardaway and Beasley bring to this rotation. But I would like to see Ausar, extended even into the low 30s. I think we would see some pretty wild defensive numbers at that point. So I'd like that he's on your list. I will point out one guy in the Eastern Conference as well who is on my list, and we overlap quite a bit. I think you hit on a lot of the good names here. I want to mention Dosunmu of the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls didn't purge the roster to the degree that I necessarily thought they would, but the big fear if they traded LaVine was, okay, are they bringing back another big piece? Are they bringing back somebody who kind of just fills the LaVine spot? No, they did not. I guess that guy is Kevin Huerter, who I don't really know what his priority level is for this organization going forward. So I'm pretty excited to see what we get out of Dosunmu. I mean, he's a guy that they're comfortable playing at like 3 different spots. He had a big game prior to the All-Star break against Detroit, and I think you can kind of look at the end of last season as a sample when LaVine was missing time and the Bulls were kind of in the tank. I mean, he was playing heavy minutes. Over the final 28 games of last season, he averaged 38 minutes per game, 17 points, 4 rebounds, almost 5 assists, over a steal per game, shot almost 50% from the field. So if Dosunmu's out there, if you're in a 12-team league or anything like that, and he's out there, maybe, in that format, maybe you're not starting him right away, but he is somebody I would go grab before someone else in your league does.
I felt like at this time last year, he was a name that we were talking about quite a bit. And with all of the turmoil, you just never really know what to expect from Chicago. But now that the trade deadline is come and gone, you have a clearer picture of what they're going to look like. And he was always a guy that, if given the room, was going to see an uptick in terms of his overall value in a format like fantasy because of his ability to shoot a high percentage from the field. And then when he gets cooking, he's a really good 3-point shooter. This past month, shooting just 30%, but he's better than that. And a guy that loves that corner 3. It's it's the most efficient 3 that you can take in basketball. So I would expect brighter days ahead for Dosunmu. Do you have anybody else that you want to nominate before I move on? We've got some questions piling up here in the chat.
I was looking at the Atlanta Hawks and just trying to find somebody. Obviously Jalen Johnson is done for the year, and they have some other guys missing time, like Vit Krejci being out of the mix actually matters for this team. And
Yep.
I couldn't go as far as to say like Karis LeVert is somebody who's going to shape the rest of the season. But we kind of forget about Karis LeVert. He's always on the verge of like falling in and out of favor with the Cavs, and I think there will be opportunity in Atlanta. I mean, he played 67 minutes over his last 2 games before the break at 20, 10, and 7 with 3 blocks in that last game against the New York Knicks. Not going to give you 3 blocks every night. You'd have to probably go back 3 or 4 years to find the last time he had 3 blocks in a game. But Atlanta needs bodies. They need experience. I think they're one of those teams that's just kind of locked into, all right, we either make the play in or we pick, 10th in the NBA draft, and nobody really wants to be there. So I think they're going to try to push for it. I think they're going to play him pretty heavy minutes. So not quite somebody who's going to shape the stretch run in fantasy basketball, but I would at least keep a cursory eye on Karis LeVert.
Yeah, disappointing what happened with the Atlanta Hawks. Once Jalen Johnson went down, it kind of felt like, the boat was sinking slowly, and then they trade DeAndre Hunter, and so and what they've taken on is depth, but now they're thin up top. Like, they're not a top-heavy team. They're thin at the top, and then they're kind of deep. They're a very weird team. They're kind of like the Portland Trailblazers of the Eastern Conference right now, where they're good enough to win any given night. They're also bad enough to be a lottery team.
They at least have some pieces, though, right? I mean, they have a better individual player than anybody in Portland in Trae Young. And, we could quibble about what the upside of a Trae Young-led team ultimately is, but he's a piece. Dyson Daniels looks like the best young defender in the NBA, maybe by a lot right now. And, Reece Shea, we'll see. Just not the greatest year to jump up 9 spots in the lottery and get the number 1 pick. But, it's not like that's been a disaster by any means. And Onyeka Okongwu, man, finally the starting center for the Atlanta Hawks. We've been asking for this for 2.5 years. So I don't know that Okongwu necessarily has another level to go up. I'm just glad that we're finally seeing this. We'll see if they mix in a little bit more Capella down the stretch. I would hope that's not the case. But he's basically been giving you 15 and 10 every single night with over a steal, over a block per game.
I want to give a little bit of love to Franz Wagner. I don't see this run of his slowing down. He's scoring into the 30s regularly, which is not something that he did a year ago. His shot was a mess. And while the form really looks much of the same, the numbers are not. He is shooting much better. He's more comfortable in terms of attacking the basket. And I think having that time without Paolo on the floor has helped him realize that he can act as a 1 and not have to play off of, he doesn't have to play sidecar. If it's his night, he kind of feels like he can fill it up, and that helps a lot in the fantasy department. This is a guy, I went back and looked at the preseason ADP. You're drafting in the 50s.
Yeah.
I mean, right now he's 15th in points per game in the NBA. He gives you rebounds, assists, steals. The percentages could be better, but I still think this is someone that has helped you to this point when he's been healthy, and I do not see this slowing down to the end of the year.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that's accurate all around. Do you want to hit a couple of these questions from the chat?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get to the bounce. All right, let's rattle off some of the questions that have popped up here. Fignuts14, great username.
Oh, yeah.
Worried that Vooch is now a pumpkin with Zach LaVine gone. Where are you at on that? Do you think that those two are connected, or is this just Vooch in a slump?
I think for almost any other organization, they would look at where they are and say, well, there's not a whole lot of sense in playing Nikola Vucevic 34 minutes every single night. But it's the Bulls, and they're going to try to be as competitive as they can. So honestly, I'm not really worried about Vooch at all. And I think the fact that there's not a Donovan Clingan behind him who you're like, oh, we need to get a look at this guy, right? It's like, maybe Jalen Smith, who's bounced around and has shown some flashes. Beyond that, it's Zach Collins, and that's it. So no, I actually think Vooch is safe. I mean, the Bulls do not operate in the way that other bad teams do.
Wow, this is Intrepid Cephalopod wrote us a paragraph. I'm gonna see if I can whittle this down, but y'all can read this if you're looking at it here on the live stream. Well, Bam has gone boom. Ware has been meh. Should I drop him for Jose Alvarado in an 8-cat league?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the cephalopod always brings great phrasing to his questions. Really, nobody is matching.
The cephalopod
phrasing.
is a regular here.
Yeah, he's a known question asker, especially on the Monday pod. So appreciate you jumping in, Seth. Man, this is tough. I mean, I think this would have seemed like an insane question to ask like a couple weeks ago, but you're right about Khalil Ware. I think the minutes have still been there for the most part. It'd be a lot more concerning if he wasn't starting and they were dwindling his minutes. But the numbers have been a lot more inconsistent. Still giving you over a block per game. He's not really giving you steals. Obviously not going to give you assists. I still think there's a chance that you would regret parting ways with Khalil Ware. Like, maybe there's somebody else on your roster you could drop to pick up Alvarado, because I mean, Alvarado's look really good. Like, I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be rostered or even started in some formats. I mean, DeJounte Murray's not coming back this year, and who knows if the Pelicans could shut down someone like CJ McCollum. So I don't mind making that swap, especially depending on which categories you need. That's really what determines this more than anything, because Alvarado is going to give you assists. He's going to give you threes. He's going to give you steals that you're not necessarily getting from Ware. But I would try to maybe find somebody else to drop.
Obi Thompson wants to know, is Goga Bitadze a drop in a 9-category league? I think personally, this really depends on how big your league is, but it's hard to make the case that he's not right now. He just hasn't been filling it up. He's back from his injury. And it just seems like whatever magic, pun intended, that he found earlier in the season has kind of faded away. I still think he's helpful to the bottom line of the Orlando Magic in a real basketball sense because of his rim protection, but the stats just aren't there. He's not grabbing rebounds at the same rate. He's certainly not scoring at the same rate. He's been in single digits over the course of the month, pretty much every game he's played except for one. Tough to trust right now. So if this is somebody you feel like you need to throw out on the wire, I have a hard time talking somebody off of that.
Yeah, I think you said the right thing. It's really about the depth of your league. I mean, if you're in a 16-team league, you could probably justify holding him. He has 8 blocks in the last 2 games, which I think if that had not happened, if you just gave him like 1 block in each of those games, I think this would be like the easiest. Yeah, you just got to drop him. But you see the 8 blocks, you don't want to miss out on that. I don't know, man. I think you can still let him go. I mean, those were his first 2 4-block games of the year. He's never had 4 blocks in any other game, even when he was routinely playing 30+ minutes earlier in the season. So, I mean, it depends on the depth of your league. It depends on where you are in your league. Alex, kind of did a good job on Monday handing out some tips, for the end of the season. And one of the things he said was, look, if you're like below 3rd place and you got to do something, like, you can't wait around for players like Goga Bitadze. You got to be aggressive. You got to shoot for upside. So I would be okay in most formats, just kind of punting on Bitadze.
And that's exactly it. The upside is not there. He might get better, but he's not going to get that much better. The role is still going to be there. He is the starting center. That's not going to go away. Let's fit in one more. Sebastian asks, but having trouble with Jalen Green, do we think he has some value as of right now? I know trade deadlines are coming up, so this is something that I think is pressing.
I think he would definitely have value. There's still name value, first of all, with Jalen Green. And, I think that the points alone have still been there. He's coming off of a really rough game against Golden State right before the break. But prior to that, you look at his last 15 games, he's basically averaging 24, 4 and 4 on solid percentages. Not great percentages, but not percentages that are really harming you all that much. You got to live with the ups and downs. He takes a ton of threes. There are going to be nights where he hits 5 or 6 of them. There are going to be nights where he goes 1 of 8 or 4 of 15 like he did against Phoenix before the break. But in general, I'm not panicking. I mean, this is kind of what we've seen with him all season. It's what we saw with him last season as well. If you're in a category league, again, take a look at what you need. If you don't need points and threes specifically, then maybe think about shipping him out, because there's somebody in your league that will need those things. And, I don't think Jalen Green is magically going to start giving you a bunch of steals. I don't think the assists are going to increase, because at some point Fred VanVleet is coming back as well. So something to keep in mind, as far as the breakdown in that Houston backcourt goes. But I'm not too worried about Jalen Green. Bottom line, I think he's basically, over the larger sample, he's been doing what he's been doing all year.
All right, we'll cut the episode right there before as Nick Whalen's voice has decided that it's ready to call it a night. I get it. We're recording this episode into the wee hours of the night here to give you all of the latest news and our opinions in the fantasy basketball world. Of course, you can check back for a variety of episodes. We got 4 for you every single week from a variety of analysts. I've been your host, Brandon Kravitz. He's Nick Whalen, who you can now catch on Prop Points on the VSiN Sports Betting Network every single weekday. Nick, you and Jeff are doing a phenomenal job on that. It's been awesome being able to follow along daily, and I will catch up with you and our audience next week.